communicating with the stakeholders, you should map out the strategies. So which strategies? It will depend on the scale. Are you going global or regional? Or are you working at national and subnational levels? Number two, sectors. Which sector to concentrate at? You should be planning and thinking aloud about it. And finally, about strategic focus. Is it about advocacy, resilience to climate change, adaptation, funding, and so forth? In my experience, I've been working in Victoria for a number of years. If you want to sound global, climate change is a global crisis, ladies and gentlemen. Then you should find a bearing, or you should find a place where you should start. And in my view, I've been starting with the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, with Sustainable Development Goals, you try to profile it. Then you realize that our talk is on climate change. And where do you find it? In the biosphere. So you have the climate change down here in the biosphere. And the biosphere supports everything upward. Could be societies, could be economy, could be partnership. So when you say stakeholders engagement, you need to include all people. Where do you find land, water, climate, right at the bottom? And it is carrying everything. So it's like having a pyramid, you have it down here. You will not discuss about the poverty, hunger, and health, if at all the climate is not correctly or working well without having water and so forth. So we have the upward linkage and the horizontal kind of linkage. And by doing so, you are likely to succeed if you consider this critical. Ladies and gentlemen, if you profile it further, we normally have the so-called 5 Ps or 5 principles, and we have sectors. So basically, you have the planet ranking number 3, which is going to or support the prosperity, and you have some development goals for that, and you have people on top, and without forgetting peace and partnership. So profiling the sustainable development goals, positioning the climate at the right place, and that could be the starting point. As I said, you realize no one is left behind. That should be the way forward when you are trying to map the stakeholders to work with. So what are the benefits of having the stakeholders engagement? It increases the support for the work you are doing. Number 2, it improves the capabilities or capacities to fulfill key roles and responsibilities. It enhances mutual accountability. And indeed, it increases the likelihood of engaging all relevant stakeholders for sustainability, without forgetting that it establishes a foundation for scale-up of the efforts in place, and finally, it increases the amount and the resources that will be available for the initiatives in place. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is why we think engaging the community, engaging stakeholders is very important. And remember, who said in 2030, leave no one behind was a stupid person? No, he was very clever indeed, and all of us are part of it. As I say, what do we communicate now? Because we are scientists producing evidence. So the second part is about communication. You covered it basically. I saw some of the slides which were used on the first day. Scientists, the way we are taught on how to communicate, we are told that you should have a message that you want to communicate. It should be the right message. But when you have the message to communicate, after you have done research, one of the most important things is to analyze the audience. So analyze the audience. Who do you want to communicate? And number 2, how do you think you should communicate? That is the message delivery. Okay? And if you know the audience and you know how to deliver the message, you are likely now to go to the third stage of now crafting the message in the right way. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the dilemma where we are. Yesterday, we were blamed. Scientists are not communicating with the journalists. And I could see us being dragged to that direction. We have to be very careful, ladies and gentlemen. we have three profiles in our communication strategies. Number one, we communicate to specific technical audience. If you go to the bottom, the first one, that's what we do. You write it to nature. Our farmers never read papers in nature. If you are expert in soil science, then you write to a journal where your fellow soil scientists will read. If you are a veterinarian, you know where to go. And basically that is the specific technical audience you should target when you are communicating. And we are taught how to write papers in nature. We are taught how to write papers in direct science and so forth. The second one is the general technical audience. Like we are sitting here, I'm a veterinarian, you are a medical doctor, you are a pharmacist, a plant breeder. You are different from other people, community members that have no knowledge about biology, have no knowledge of whatever you claim to have. So that is number two, and then we have platforms, for example, conferences or gathering like this one, we can communicate. What the journalists were mentioning to us yesterday in the last part, non-technical audience. So we have the role to play to communicate in all those three platforms. I go to the villages and the people would say, Professor, I've been working in universities for about 25 years. How can you communicate to a primary school kid? If you fail to communicate to a primary school kid, it's a big failure. He or she must understand your message. You must pass that message. That's why the youth are saying we don't want to be sidelined. We want to be part of the summit. Communicate to us. Your leaders at the level of president, communicate to us. We want to understand and take action. So ladies and gentlemen, we should not be dragged. What we need is to profile and then to segment, knowing what to communicate to who, specific audience, or as I said, you have the general technical audience or the non-technical audience is our role. In climate change communication, ladies and gentlemen, to be successful in communication, we have two key elements. Number one, credibility, and number two is trust. This is very fundamental. To be credible, ladies and gentlemen, what people wish to hear from us and say, this guys are credible. The information must be very correct, very accurate. And number two, the speed of release. You generate your results and you stay with the results for 10 years waiting for patents. It will never work. You will look like you are useless. You want to invent, yes, but the farmers want the solution today. So we should balance and make sure that we transform our mindset and take into action the credibility issue. Number two, trust, empathy. Are you sitting in a position of those farmers that are suffering? And what about openness? You are hiding. And I'm very happy because Canadian countries, I work with them, I've been working with them, I work with the US. US, they want me to patent. Canadian, they're saying, no, release the results, let people use it. After all, it's the money from the taxpayers, whatever. It's Canadian, they are so empathetic, they put themselves in a position of farmers. They're very low people who want solutions back to them. And by the way, I've been trying to map, fairly to present my PowerPoint presentation. If you go through publications in climate change, over 80% are on characterizing and trying to explain about the causes of climate change in Lake Victoria, you name it. Papers on solutions are less than 20%. Less than 20% are on solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, we are losing basically the trust to the communities. And that's why they say those scientists, the ivory towers, let them remain where they are. And you go to them, you say, we want to solve the problem of climate change. We speak on what we want them to understand. And what we promised Danilo, that I'm going to communicate, I will communicate this. We are failing to start from the foundation, understanding them first, before we can make ourselves understood in the community. So this is very critical, ladies and gentlemen. So I've already presented. Now the question is, with climate change communication, ladies and gentlemen, we ask our question, why should we communicate? communicate with whom? Remember the three audience. We have a role to cross over and make sure we present to all of them. Then how to communicate, what to communicate. And I'll just touch base by when I'll be concluding about the 6 principles for good communication in climate change. Why, with whom, how, and what. So what to communicate? Why do you think we need to communicate around climate change? That should be the first question. We are here for 1 week. Ask yourself, why should we communicate? Ladies and gentlemen, climate change is real. However, does it make good sense to people who are not good academicians? I say it, what has made, and we are in the disaster right now, is the change in temperature to a less than 1 degree Celsius. Do you think that is a striking thing? I don't know how much resources we are putting there. Is a silent killer, as it is, for example, for antimicrobial resistance. I was trying to map out. If you present about antimicrobial resistance, which is killing about 1.3 million people, if you go through Lancet, and if you present about malaria, which is killing 0.65, 50% of what antimicrobial resistance is killing, and basically AMR, no, not AMR, climate change is killing more than that. We don't have evidence, we don't have data to date, how much we are losing in terms of mortality from climate change. People will be fearing about malaria. HIV is killing 0.8 million. People will fear about that. AMR, which is killing 1.3, it's okay, it's a silent killer. Climate change, the same, who bothers? I was reading about the of emerging pandemics. How much have we lost, or we are losing from the COVID-19? You might find actually it's less than what we are losing from the climate change. But the nature of the problem and the way we craft our message could make us sound like we are useful to the communities. So you should ask yourself, communicate with whom, identify the audience correctly. Identify them, and if you use the tool that I gave you, group them, and make sure that you use the stakeholders engagement, stakeholders mapping approaches. All of us are affected. But when you communicate, you should also be thinking if at all those people are active listeners or not. I tell you, you map people, you realize you have 3 different groups when you're trying to communicate. You have people, the majority basically will just hear words, be it in news, be it in whatever, they will read it's just words. And if you ask them, what is it all about this story? You will basically repeat exactly the same words that you presented. You realize this man is just hearing the words, and the message will never stick. And if you are mapping the stakeholders, you will find them is not part of the promoters. You have the second group, they have feelings, they will paraphrase what you communicated to them. The best group, you have guys who are reflecting, they will use their own words and try to structure and present what is very important. So as a scientist, we are being taught also to map the people, map the stakeholders based on the 3 groups that I've presented. There is the so-called mental noise. When people are stressed and upset, they have difficulties in hearing information, understanding information, and remembering information, which actually I said you might be the cause of the 3 groups that I presented. Paraphrasing or reflecting or just hear words. We could be the source of that. How to communicate, ladies and gentlemen? I'm referring to this professor in psychology. He said, actually, when you're communicating, understand that if you put words, just words alone, the message will go by 7%. If you include the voice accounts for about 38%. And ladies and gentlemen, if you add all the body language, which contribute about 55%, then you are likely to succeed very much. The Rahabian professor, he published his paper in 1940s about 73855 principles of communicating. You don't need actually to spend time to know who is happy and not happy. But you could write a sentence about this man on the left side is happy. 70%. Imagine your husband, okay? You spend a lot of time writing about that. But you could also explain using voice, which will sound for about 38%. But basically, the body language, when we communicate, helps quite a lot. In the advert, people use the body language. How are we communicating the issue of climate change, segmenting our strategy that we use body language? So I think we should refer to this professor who is very helpful in that. And when we are crafting messages, select a message that will resonate your audience and what they care about. I said we present what we feel is important, and we forget to work hard and present what is relevant to the audience. That is key. There is no excuse. Consider your audience substructure where they belong and prepare numerous messages ahead of time and make sure that you don't only focus on one aspect. Could it be about climate change, the causes of climate change or the drivers, but make sure that you pass the message also on what should be done. You should localize the issue, as I said, and yesterday you could hear, we are saying, we are hearing and we work it global. Yes, there are solutions for Europe, but don't forget the solutions for Africa. We have a stake and we have the right place to do. Use win-win examples. I was happy. I couldn't find good examples for Africa. I don't know why. So I had to use one. They're saying tomorrow's, so actually it's bike from Denmark. Denmark, they are very good in biking. Yeah? So basically they have a campaign. You drive only once a week. Okay, when is that? Basically you drive on maybe on weekends. Yeah? But when they go to work, they use bike. I was happy to see the president of Denmark when he was receiving the president. I think it was from France. And actually the welcome note, they exchanged the bike. Eh? And I was imagining when I would see our president here biking. This is very hard. In case someone mentioned it. So we fired it, like the one who organized it. At the same time, I say, ladies and gentlemen, it is a serious issue. It's a wicked challenge. Denmark, they are doing like that. But I went back. What is the population of Denmark? 5 million. And what is the population of Dar es Salaam?
7 million.
And how much Denmark is consuming compared to Dar es Salaam? Okay, I don't know if it's less. It could be more. Okay, because imagine the whole resource for Denmark is only for Dar es Salaam. Because that is the reality. It's simple statistics. That's what I'm saying. It's not a simple thing. We present climate change as a simple. It's not a simple, ladies and gentlemen. It's a wicked problem that requires serious planning on what you can do. And no one is safe, and no one is excused from causing the challenges which are getting today. We have to communicate. So I'm about to conclude. And basically we have 6 principles for good communication, and I normally use abbreviation. Number 1, keep it simple. I don't know how to do it, but I say keep it simple. Keep it simple. Targeting the non-technical audience, then translate it further to very specific audience that are reading papers of nature, science, and so forth. And number 2, when you present it, like I'm doing myself, I'm a veterinarian, a lost veterinarian, having worked in national parks for more than 10 years. And if you ask today, that man is a professor of what? Fish. I'm a professor of fish diseases. And then, which fish? The catfish. So I belong there. But when I was presenting here, and before I could name myself, I'm a professor in fish diseases, I was saying, that man, he knows about climate change. I'm presenting unexpectedly because I learned more on the global issues. And I've been moving around the world presenting this. I'm using the The basic knowledge I got, the technical skills I got, and I mix it, or I bring together the soft skills. Then I move forward to present topical issues, global issues like climate change. Give concrete examples, it's important. Credibility, remember I mentioned. Allow emotion to accentuate the message. Yesterday, I think it was very key. And we need journalists, basically. Expert, they're expert. For the first time I met Rebecca, she told me, when I write, and we are with the journalists in Tanzania, they say, you bring us news. It's about antimicrobial resistance, and the next day they write people should not eat eggs. Then I encountered some conflict with producers, poultry producers. And there was someone the one day at the Regional Commission, because we presented very nicely that you have to be very careful, cook it well, and we had 6 journalists. So 2 of them were paid because we invited. 4 of them were not paid, and my boss refused. So tomorrow, front page. It's very dangerous to eat eggs. And it was a Saturday with the weddings. You remember? You know that. So early in the morning, we were receiving a phone call from the Regional Commission saying, Robinson, what is wrong? And we said, no, we did not say like that. We had to organize, call them, had a press conference, and we paid them dearly. And they were very happy. Post it to that. So when you speak to them, they say, we live by punch news. You understand? Punch news. That's why we are scared of trying to work with them. We are afraid sometimes. We must be friends. Otherwise, you let them present, they will present things which have no evidence. Then you'll be blamed. You are employed by the government. People are paying taxes to make sure that we generate evidence that the journalist will use to report some of the things that have done. We should never run away from them. Use stories, and they are very good. How to communicate? We have social media, different groups. I've tested the young guys. They are very good on social media. Initially, we were saying this is losing, they're going to get lost. They are not. And actually, I tried to ask them to compose the music about diseases I teach in fish. They are very good in that. Yeah. So they'll say tuberculosis is coming, then they sing and they pass more the exams. And if you ask them to use and they will capitalize on social media, you make them happy and they can communicate climate change and they work for free. I'm working with them nowadays. What they need is not the per diems. They need a bus with good music. So if you give them good music, let them go. I tell you, in one day, they would have communicated to more than 6 million people. I tell you, I've been monitoring that. But for you, I will communicate using leaflets. How many people read your leaflets? Very few. And how much time will you spend? So, social media are key. We have websites. For them, they are not even interested. Because if they write in website, you correct them. They go for shorthand, okay? Yeah, so shorthand is perfect with their social media. Websites are too formal. So you must make sure that you selected the right one. Television, who watches television? It will depend. In Tanzania, put something on TBC, Tanzania Broadcasting News. No one will go through that. It's only the leaders. You get the point. But the youths, who comprises more than 35% of the total population, they never go to that media. So we have to be very careful. Printed materials, they are good. Outreach meetings, yes, but actually the efficiency is very low. I'm giving you this because of my experience working in Lake Victoria. I did it with the small sardines, and I'm having, if you go through my YouTubes, you will find the Thamani, Yadaga. It's very good, and they try to reach people using that. So message mapping is very important, and as I said, present what you think is important for them. And ladies and gentlemen, we must learn to understand, learn to be understood. And this one is from Stephen Covey, who wrote about the 7 habits of the highly successful people. Try to understand, learn to be understood. Most of the time, as the researchers, we are taught by our mentors, this is your work, you should be able to defend, and you are the most knowledgeable person. When you are communicating issues like climate change, put yourself very down. You are very knowledgeable. but don't advance your knowledge. You will end up teaching us about rock phosphate instead of teaching us on how we should solve the climate change challenges. So we should learn to understand, then to be understood. So when I'm concluding, you should know the target, keep message short, give action recommendation in positive terms. Do rather than don't do. So we are happy when they hear about that. Decision making. We are using the Stakeholder model. It is very critical. People say, I wanted to communicate this, but I was not allowed. You know what? We are government. We have government. They have a role to play. And when you work as a scientist, you have one component. But what about the economic factors, the public values, political factors, technological factors, social factors, legal factors? So if you use the Stakeholder model, then you realize communicating what you have generated is not a simple thing. Government, I know, I worked actually, I'm a toxicologist, aquatic toxicologist working with fish. So I have a professor who ended up discovering high levels of polychlorinated hydrocarbons. Water bodies, you have Meru Dam. It's the only water body in Morogoro. 75% of people depend on that. Oh, people are saying, we should communicate that people should not use that water. I went to the water engineer, he said, we have an alternative. And the same thing happened to our president. You get the point? Because we are talking about, yes, we have a challenge, for example, Corona, that fasting social distancing, okay? Does it work? I don't know. So this man is saying, I don't know if it works. Because you go to the household, these people, the couples have no social distancing, and only one person suffered. The other survived. And the scientist is talking the right thing. So when we are communicating, don't say don't farm, give them the solution. Because in the government, actually, sometimes they don't respond because we don't reflect what they are doing. As I'm concluding, we should communicate it is a crisis, but also work hand in hand with the government. Though we speak about the civil society organization, when you have the start, normally the civil society, when they come to the summit, they say, punch news, create fear. That's what they want. So as they create fear, yes, it's okay. But with the time, as you create fear, you cause basically immunosuppression. People are stressed, and you end up let people suffer more. And what did the government do? Instead of having fear, maybe to 70%, you see that arrow, so they will do whatever they can to reduce it to 40%. And you could see in terms of time, before you go to the acceptable level, if you are not good in communication strategies, it can take you 1 year. But actually, if you are using what we are trying to impart to you, you reduce the time maybe instead of 12 months, you have stress for only maybe 6 months or 8 months. So basically, when you consider the Stakeholder model elements, it takes you there. And with the climate change, though, we don't consider it as a crisis, but we should try and communicate strategically. In conclusion, climate change is real, and I tell you, is human-induced. Number 2, has negative consequences, and we need to start taking action now. We have enough evidence to act. Let us come up with the solutions, and we should use win-win approaches, and we should leave no one behind. So thank you very much for listening. I present.
Thank you so much, Robinson. As always, a pleasure to listen to you. Now, I think we do have some questions from outside. One of them is you're talking about giving concrete examples. Could you give one concrete examples on where you have used communication tactics to engage your stakeholders, the ones that you want to reach?
Thank you very much. I have one example in Lake Victoria. We are having, Lake Victoria is dominated by 3 species of fish. We have the sardines, omena, the small dada. the composition is almost 75%, although they are not valid. Why? Because of the poor quality. Then you have the Nile page. The Nile page sounds very well because we're exporting it. And you have the Nile up here, the so-called sato. The Tanzanian, by regulations, we are not supposed to export sato. It's reserved as a source of food for Tanzania. So we exported the tagalo. The post-harvest loss, especially during the rain season, it will go up to 100%, and you are losing the tons. So we worked there, and we came up with very good solutions. Although with those solutions, we could not solve it 100%. We went for renewable energy. So they are using solar to dry. Instead of drying on sand, we created the racks, raised racks. And we came up with the so-called greenhouses to have temperature, because with the raised rack during the rains could not also help because it's outside. So we had nice solutions. On top of that, we were able to salvage less than 2%. So 98% was still lost. So the only way was to go for industry. We explored and we found very good investors. They have resources. They are in Mwanza. And they were sourced. We went to China with the simple technology, and then we got dryers, which basically could dry more than six tons of daga per day. And we thought it was a solution. Now, when we tried to advance this together with the Tanzania Industrial Development Organization, we missed a snack because we did not do the stakeholders engagement very well. Who are those? Basically, in the stakeholders mapping, the influence and the power, members of parliament, you see, and the so-called local councillors, we are not very well involved. They came to us, they said, do you know how many people we're employing with the way we are drying our fish, no matter whether they are good or not? We gave the figure, they said, assure us by bringing those industries, we'll be able to absorb these people. There was no answer, so the project stopped. And we realized that they are so powerful than the researchers, because they went around, they said, you see, never accept this project because it's going to kill your employment. Okay. So this is a good example in the experience. So we had to refrain and we went back. And luckily enough, we got a president who actually was powerful, Magufuli. And to them, industrial and anything which could develop money was good. So through his mechanism, we went back and he wanted to use force. We were not accepted because in the same locations, there was operation for illegal fishing. So again, they said, you see these guys now, they're coming forcefully again, they will do something bad. We were not accepted. So it's not as simple as you think when you're trying to come up with the solutions, because you must think about the benefits, their survivals, their livelihoods, the solutions that you're doing. Thank you.
Now we have another question. Let's see if I can get this right. Climate change communication usually ignores the levels of poverty of communities. How can we communicate to people not to cut trees, for example, but giving them feasible alternatives? How can we help to spread this type of awareness, for example?
That's a good question and a tough one. There are two things. One, we should come up with alternatives and basically a workable alternative, a solution which you think can work. So people should not cut trees. Then what is the alternative? If it's a source of energy, then you must make sure that the energy source is available. For example, electricity. I'm citing an example of Tanzania. Now we are having a rural electrification program going around in the communities. We can indeed invest into that and make sure that from the government viewpoint, we get enough support that will help and encourage the end users to adopt and take these technologies openly. If at all we are having farmers, you go for biomass, for example, biogas production, it can work. They are lucrative technologies when you present, but when it comes to reality on the use itself, is not as simple as we think. So the solution, indeed, from the last part of the question, having technology, creating awareness is not enough. But will people take that innovation and put it to use? It depends on four main issues. I use the social and the behavior, because the behavior change is the issue. It's not a question of poverty as it is. We are poverty in our minds, and even if we become rich or we are good in terms of prosperity, we forget about that. Who is the biggest user of the charcoal, for example, in Tanzania? Is Dar es Salaam. And you would wonder, yeah, I'm saying could be me or somebody else actually. You are somewhere and you're going home, you find our carriers in our car, okay, carrying bags of what? Of charcoal. And you wonder, are these people poor indeed? Do they really need it? So the poverty is in our mind. And it contributes by 90% of the failures. How to, I liked yesterday, decolonize that, how to remove that mindset. Basically, number one, you create awareness. Creating awareness is one thing. What is required is working around the peers. Peers, it means you are having fellows very closer to you. If you are taking a technology, you turn around and you realize them they are using it, you are likely to continue using it. It's like what happened during COVID-19. We had the washing hand stations everywhere. And in my university, basically, people were washing. But with time, you go around and you find people are not washing their hands. You also go back, okay? So to me, even the practices, good practices that will make us solve the climate change challenges, they depend very much on the families and the peers. And if we change and they also change, we are likely to move. The third thing is about the local government authorities. Are we having good, for example, local bylaws, for example, which will help us utilize the alternatives more wise if we think about cost effectiveness. And finally, I mentioned about the scale, international scale and the global scale. Are we getting good support for that? One said, instead of pushing us to plant trees, we have been planting. But why can't you subsidize the price for this? Why can't you subsidize the cost for fuel? Because if we do that, then we teach people slowly. It's a matter of no prioritization. Which priorities? So what I'm saying is changing, creating awareness is not enough, but we need very strong mechanisms to make sure that we instill the good practices and to make sure that they are sustained. We introduce them to them, make sure that their cost effectiveness, come up with the technologies which will make it attractive to them. Through that, they are likely to change.
Thanks a lot for that. I think we're going to take 2 questions for the researchers here. And I can see, Rex, you have your hands up. Can you please come up here?
Yeah, mine is.
Start speaking when you can.
Yeah, thank you. From the issue you are discussing, I see there's a big challenge with respect to the alternatives. There's a typical situation in Ghana now. We don't know how we could solve that problem. And the problem is that, as you said, we've been educating people to move away from using the forest trees or cutting them for charcoal and all other things. And therefore, government introduced a policy where we wanted to make sure gas, electricity, and all those things are available for the rural people to use. And recent economic problems that globally we are all experiencing, prices of these, like the gas and the electricity, all these have gone up. And now the people, they have the taste to use the electricity as a source of energy. They have the taste to also use the gas. They've gotten the message right. Now they are leaving the forest alone somehow, and therefore going by this. Now the prices have also been increased. Now the people are going back to the forest to get the charcoal again. So in this situation, how do we address this?
Oh, Thank you very much for a nice question. Remember, when I was responding to the previous question, I said creating awareness, educating people is one thing, but pushing them to a position where they can practice is another thing. You must analyze the so-called barriers and the incentives to what you're trying to introduce. So, did you, in the policy, did they analyze the barriers in there and the incentives for them to take the technologies? You have a risk, and basically when you are doing the risk mapping, then you say, guys, this could be implemented, provided the price for the fuel is acceptable or is affordable. So the risks are always there. And when you talk about the risks, it's something which is beyond your capacity, beyond your control. We are not the one who said there should be a war between Russia and Ukraine. You get the point. So basically, unless you have mapped the incentives, you have mapped the barriers, and you find the solutions to them, awareness and education alone cannot change. The policies are there, are on papers, but the reality is what you face and you to make you survive. Number one is survive. So we should go to the next stage, next mark. And in my view, if we are able to come up with the solutions, the barriers for uptake of such technologies, barriers, solutions to barriers, to make sure that the policies goes into practice in the right way, then we are unlikely to succeed.
Yeah, there's another problem where we realized that this analysis was done concerning the barriers and all that. And we realized that if we are able to keep the prices down, people will be able to use these resources, and then they will be able to leave the forest alone. Now, government brought up a policy to keep these prices down. Then smugglers also began to send them to Togo, neighboring countries, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, and then government realized that then what should we do again? Because the prices are down, people are also smuggling the resources to these countries, and therefore in the end Ghana is losing. So now government says that no way, prices are not going to go down. The people are in the forest again.
Thank you very much. You remember in my presentation for the stakeholders mapping, I went down, I said, think about the scale, the solution you are bringing. Will it be functional at a local level? I mentioned about the national, the sub-national levels, going down to the villages, but I said, think about the region. And the region could be now the ECOWAS region or whatever, for example, for us, the SADC region in Africa, for example. But I say the biggest scale which you must think is the global forces. I remember I said basically international, globally. So Ghana alone cannot solve that, I tell you. We must come together as a region, and there has to be a unified kind of approach globally. So there will be no need of smuggling, because what we are saying now, prices for fuel in Ghana, it will be the same with what in Nigeria. So there will be no need of smuggling the oil. You got the point. But short of that, so it's very hard. That's why I say climate change, ladies and gentlemen, is a wicked problem. Wicked problem by definition. You are in Tanzania, you should learn Swahili. This center was established for Swahili, okay? Wicked problem in Swahili is known as a Dudubaya. Dudubaya. So basically, if you Google wicked problem is Dudubaya. So I don't know. I think this lady, young one, she can translate. Dudubaya is something, I don't know what is that, but it's something which has no single solution. It has multiple solutions. And if you have to solve it, it requires attention from the sub-national level going all the way to the international level.
Yes, I have just one question. And I just wanted to know that how did you build trust again to the journalists after they reported that people should not eat eggs?
Thank you very much. I showed you one of the slides about credibility, and I said we should be trusted. As a scientist, we must have data. And they never run away from the problem. We had to be very open. Because the challenge was the antimicrobial residues. We are treating chicken, we are treating cows, and the veterinarians are very clever. They have the so-called withdraw period. After you have treated the chicken, you should allow, or you should not use the eggs for 5 or 7 days. The same thing for milk. You cannot treat the cows today and use the milk. So they'll say you should observe the withdrawal period. A very lucrative statement. I went back and I asked people, you are here also. Unless there is a compensation in it, which again require a higher scale, people will never observe the withdrawal period. We are having now commercial farmers in Morogoro, where I live. This man is having 30,000 layers and is getting 28,000 eggs per day. And you are saying before, because you are treating, okay, what you should do? You should observe with the draw period to protect the public. Throw away the eggs for 7 days. Who does it? And you have a loan from the bank, and you're supposed to pay back the loan. They have no idea on whether you should really observe the withdrawal period. I tell you, I was presenting a paper, and the government was saying, yes, farmers will observe the withdrawal period. I said, show me where they throw away the eggs. No one did that. What about milk? We are having farmers now having animals producing 20 to 30 liters of milk per animal per day. And they want him to throw away that milk for 7 days. Who does it? It's not easy. It's not easy. So we said, guys, instead of saying people should not eat eggs, as a veterinarians, we have come up with solutions. So I'm having 2 projects funded by the Danish organization known as ICAS, International Center for Antimicrobial Resistance Solutions. So what I'm doing, ladies and gentlemen, in my project, after I met those challenges, I'm now advocating and pushing them to go through what is known as the vaccination. Vaccination is cheap, but practice is difficult when you don't have electricity, because the vaccine requires cold chain. So it's another challenge. But if you push and you help them vaccinate where possible, number 2, apply the so-called biosecurity measures. Try to limit, distance the pathogen from the chickens. Then you are likely to get chickens which are not getting diseases. And if they don't get disease, they are not treated. Eventually, they produce the so-called safe meat in a self. On top of that, I'm treating the manure. Ladies and gentlemen, if you use antibiotics today, what is utilized in your body is only 10 to 30%. What goes out through manure or fecal material is 70 to 90%. Now I'm having people here, they're saying, we are producing organically using manure from animals. Is that organic when you have antibiotics, 70% in it? Ask yourself, it's complex. So what I'm doing now, I'm providing solutions. Before you use your manure, I have discovered the Chinese are very good. They are composting it. Just to work around the pH and the temperature and the humidity, then you can reduce the antibiotics by 90%. So let the farmer produce whatever they are doing. Should they use antibiotics, teach them not to use the raw manure, compost it, but you should have a simple solution. So that is what we are doing. And actually we got money from Denmark and we got money from the government, and we are pushing to come up with the solutions. We didn't leave. And we are very friends with the journalists. They are now educating communities. This is the way to go. Make sure that you do the vaccination, make sure you do the biosecurity, and make sure that you treat the manure before it's utilized, because you end up having high levels of antibiotics in water, high level of antibiotics in manure, and eventually in vegetables. And you have the proof for that. Thank you.
Let's give Ron an Thank you so much again for a very inspiring talk. Now, this is all we have for today. And if we didn't manage to respond to all your questions, then please send it to us by email. You can send it to dfc@dfcenter.dk, and we'll see to get back to you. We'll have another Knowledge and Action talks, and we will, what do I want to say? I want to say that we'll announce it in our newsletter, so please sign up to our newsletter, and we'll also announce it on social media. So thank you so much for today from MSTCDC and from Danida Fellowship Center. This is all for now. Goodbye.
Thank you.